Imagine opening your eyes one morning and realizing that most people around you no longer ask questions. The streets are filled with noise, screens flash with endless updates, and opinions are exchanged faster than breaths. The mind, once a sharp instrument of wonder and discovery, feels dulled, exhausted, almost empty. And what is most unsettling is how normal this feels. Picture a society where to pause and reflect is seen as weakness, where silence is uncomfortable and doubt is dangerous. In this world, people no longer search for truth. They settle for what spreads the fastest, what earns approval, what feels familiar. Critical thinking, once a human strength, has quietly slipped into the background. In its place rises something darker, a collective sleep, a state where borrowed beliefs replace authentic understanding. You've seen it in small ways. A post with 10,000 shares appears on your feed. Without a second thought, people repeat it, convinced it must be true. Or a meeting where everyone agrees, not because they believe, but because speaking out feels too risky. These moments may seem ordinary, but together they tell a story. They reveal a world drifting away from reflection into blind conformity. In this journey, we will explore why thinking has become so rare. We will see how education, media, and even our own fears condition us to follow instead of question. We will uncover why slowing down feels uncomfortable and why silence frightens us more than noise. And most importantly, we will ask how you can resist this tide, how you can reclaim the quiet power of your own mind. Before we begin, I invite you to pause. Ask yourself, when was the last time you let an idea truly sink in before reacting? When was the last time you read slowly or listened deeply without rushing to reply? These small acts of awareness may be the seeds of freedom. Stay with me, because this is not only about intelligence, it is about courage. It is about choosing truth over comfort, clarity over noise. And the future will belong to those who still dare to think when the world forgets how. Thinking has always demanded effort. It asks us to slow down, to hold a question in the silence, to resist the temptation of easy answers. But in today's world, effort is no longer rewarded. What is celebrated now is speed, certainty, and reaction. To stop and reflect feels almost rebellious. Many people discover this when they dare to speak a thought that goes against the current. In an online group, someone raises a question, only to be flooded with accusations of being negative or difficult. At work, an employee suggests an alternative view, and the room grows tense. The message is subtle but powerful. Do not think too much. Do not disturb the flow. Stay in line. The philosopher Noam Chomsky warned about this decades ago. He described how systems of power survive by creating what he called the manufacturing of consent. It means people are trained to agree without truly understanding. They are shaped to consume ideas, not examine them. And once that habit is in place, manipulation becomes simple. But the deeper danger is emotional. Critical thinking is uncomfortable because it exposes uncertainty. It demands that we admit we do not know everything. And in a culture that prizes confidence and quick answers, saying, "I am not sure," feels almost shameful. The ego resists it. The tribe resists it. Our fear of rejection often silences the very questions that could bring us closer to truth. Think of how often you have kept quiet in conversation, even when something felt wrong. You felt a small tension in your chest, but you let it pass. Speaking out might have risked your belonging, and belonging feels safer than truth, so you stayed silent. But silence, repeated enough times, becomes its own kind of obedience. The cost is not only personal but collective. When individuals stop thinking, societies drift into passivity. When reflection is replaced by slogans, power becomes easier to consolidate. It is not intelligence that disappears, but the courage to use it. And the world becomes filled with voices repeating, but not understanding. So what does this mean for you? It means that the simple act of asking, "Why?" has become one of the rarest and most powerful things you can do. It means that to think for yourself, even in small ways, is already an act of freedom. And what now? Begin with the smallest habit. Before you agree, pause. Before you share, reflect. Before you dismiss, ask yourself, Could there be another layer here? Thinking does not always give you quick certainty, but it gives you clarity, and clarity is the first step toward living awake. To think today is to take a risk. You may be misunderstood, you may be ignored, but you also gain something the crowd cannot give you: self-respect, depth, and a quiet alignment with truth. That is why thinking has become dangerous, not because it is weak, but because it has the power to break illusions that many prefer to keep. Our minds were not designed to live in a storm of endless information. Each day we wake up to notifications, headlines, updates, and messages that chase us until we fall asleep again. Neuroscientists like Daniel Levitin have shown that the average person today processes 5 times more information than someone just a few decades ago. The brain, under this pressure, begins to take shortcuts. It no longer examines, it reacts. It looks for signals to follow instead of truth to uncover. You have probably felt this in your own life. You scroll through your feed and see a health tip shared by 10,000 people. It says something simple, even miraculous, like drink lemon water and cure illness. Do you stop to check the source, or do you trust the crowd because the number of shares feels convincing? This is not reason at work. This is social proof, a shortcut your brain takes when the noise becomes too heavy. The overload does not only affect what we believe, it reshapes how we read, how we listen, how we think. Marianne Wolf, a neuroscientist studying reading, describes how digital media rewires our brains for skimming. We jump between tabs, we skim headlines, we rarely give our attention fully to one thing. The practice of deep reading, once natural, is now fading. Without sustained focus, reflection becomes almost impossible. Think of the last time you tried to read an entire article without checking your phone. Perhaps a notification buzzed, and you felt an itch to look. Perhaps your mind grew restless, urging you to switch to something quicker, something lighter. That restless feeling is not weakness, it is conditioning. Your brain has been trained to crave constant stimulation, and in the process, it resists the stillness that real thinking requires. Carl Sagan once warned that we live in a society exquisitely dependent on science and technology, while hardly anyone understands them. His concern was not just ignorance, but the erosion of our ability to think critically about the very systems we depend on. Surrounded by more data than ever, we are starving for clarity. Surrounded by endless words, we are losing the capacity for depth. This has an emotional cost as well. The flood of information leaves us anxious, restless, afraid of missing out. It is easier to skim, to react, to pass along what feels urgent, than to stop and reflect. But this constant flood comes with a hidden price. When attention is scattered, wisdom cannot grow. Reflection needs stillness. Truth needs space. So what does this mean for us? It means that the very habit of slowing down has become rare. It means that if you cannot hold your focus, you cannot hold your thoughts either. And without that focus, the ability to question and discern slowly dissolves. And what now? Start by reclaiming your attention. Choose to read one thoughtful piece fully instead of 20 fragments. Turn off notifications for an hour and let your mind breathe. Practice giving your whole focus to one task, one book, one conversation. These may seem like small choices, but they are acts of resistance. Because in a culture that thrives on noise, to focus is radical. In a time when everyone is rushing, to read slowly is a rebellion. And in a world where truth is drowned in distraction, the choice to pay attention may be the most powerful act of freedom you still have. If this content is making sense to you, please click the subscribe button and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for your support. Education is often praised as the path to knowledge, but few stop to ask what kind of knowledge it truly gives. From the very beginning, many schools have not been designed to nurture curiosity. They were shaped in the age of factories, when society needed predictable workers more than independent thinkers. What mattered was punctuality, order, and obedience. Children were trained to follow, not to question. Think of your own memories in school. Perhaps you once raised your hand and asked why, only to be told to stop interrupting the lesson. Perhaps you had ideas that went beyond the textbook, but they were dismissed as distractions. Slowly, the message became clear. Answers are rewarded. Questions are troublesome. To color inside the lines is safe. To step outside is risky. John Taylor Gatto, an award-winning teacher, revealed this hidden structure of schooling. He argued that modern education does not exist to create independent minds, but to produce compliant citizens. In his words, schools teach children how to obey orders, and when you hear this, a part of you may resist, because we want to believe education sets us free. Yet if you look closely, you may remember how often your spirit of inquiry was quietly pushed aside. The tragedy is that this lesson does not end in childhood. It follows us into adulthood. In the workplace, questioning consensus can make you seem difficult. Among friends, disagreeing may risk exclusion. Even in family conversations, asking uncomfortable questions can turn silence against you. The training works. Obedience becomes natural. Dissent feels unsafe. Psychologist Erich Fromm saw this clearly. In his book, Escape from Freedom, he explained that many people secretly long to surrender their independence of thought. Freedom requires responsibility, and responsibility can be frightening. If you think for yourself, you must own your choices. You can no longer blame the system or the crowd, and for many, that weight feels too heavy to carry. Imagine sitting in a meeting. You know the plan is flawed, but everyone else nods in agreement. You feel a tightening in your chest, a quiet voice urging you to speak. Yet you stay silent. In that silence, you trade truth for belonging. In that silence, you keep your place in the group, but lose a piece of your authenticity. These moments seem small, but they shape the soul. So what does this mean for us? It means that from the start, we were conditioned to believe that fitting in is safer than asking why. It means the habit of obedience has been planted so deeply that many no longer notice when they surrender their voice. And what now? Begin to reclaim the practice of questioning. Ask yourself each day, what rule am I following without reflection? What belief have I accepted without proof? Write them down. Dare to sit with the discomfort they bring. Even a single question, honestly asked, can loosen the grip of conditioning. Because the goal of education should never have been compliance. The true purpose is to awaken minds, to give us the courage to face truth. And if the system does not give this to you, then you must give it to yourself. Each time you question, each time you resist the easy answer, you are not only unlearning obedience, you are rediscovering your freedom. What once promised to connect the world has quietly become a machine of distraction. Social media is built to hold your attention, not to nurture your reflection. The design is simple. Keep you scrolling, keep you reacting, keep you returning. What matters is not truth, but engagement. What matters is not understanding, but how long you stay inside the loop. You have seen this in your own habits. You post something thoughtful, a long reflection on life, and it receives only a handful of likes. The next day you share a quick joke or a sharp reaction, and the notifications flood your screen. What lesson does the platform teach you? That depth is ignored, while speed and outrage are rewarded. Slowly, without noticing, you adjust your voice to what the algorithm applauds. Marshall McLuhan once said that the medium is the message. The way we receive information shapes how we think. On these platforms, speed matters more than depth, emotion more than accuracy, and certainty more than humility. Even when you try to engage with care, the design itself pushes you toward noise. Reflection feels too slow for the endless feed. Silence feels irrelevant against the constant demand to respond. The trap runs deeper than convenience. Each time you react instantly, you strengthen the habit of thinking less. Each time you share without checking, you give power to the crowd over your own discernment. The more you live inside this rhythm, the harder it becomes to pause. The harder it becomes to ask whether what you see is true. Imagine reading a headline designed to provoke anger. Your first impulse is to click, to react, to join the chorus of comments. Hours later, you discover the headline was misleading, the story incomplete, but the damage is already done. The outrage was shared, the fire already spread. And in this cycle, truth is not lost by accident. It is buried under repetition, distraction, and emotional manipulation. This is why misinformation spreads so quickly. People no longer judge an idea by its evidence, but by how many people agree with it. Popularity becomes the measure of reality. The tyranny of the majority is no longer only political, it has become cognitive. Minds shaped not by reason, but by the loudest echoes. So what does this mean for us? It means that every time you surrender your attention to these platforms without awareness, you risk losing a piece of your clarity. It means that if you let the crowd decide what is true, you are giving away your freedom to think. And what now? Begin to create boundaries with your own digital life. Before reacting, wait. Give yourself 24 hours before sharing news that stirs your emotions. Choose to write one thoughtful post, even if it earns little attention, instead of chasing reactions. Practice stepping outside the feed to read, to listen, to reflect. Because social media will not reward silence, but your soul will. It will not applaud your patience, but your mind will. And in a world designed to drown you in noise, the simple act of slowing down, of guarding your attention, is nothing less than reclaiming your freedom. At the heart of this crisis lies not only technology or institutions, but the fragile patterns of the human mind itself. We like to believe that we make decisions through reason, but most of the time we do not. Nobel Prize winner Daniel Kahneman explained that the brain works with two systems. One is fast, automatic, emotional. The other is slow, deliberate, careful. The problem is simple. In the rush of modern life, most people are stuck in fast mode. You can see this in daily life. A friend sends you an article that confirms what you already believe. Without reading deeply, you nod and agree. Another person shares a story that challenges your opinion, and you instantly feel defensive. The reaction comes before the reflection. This is not evidence speaking. This is confirmation bias, the brain's habit of protecting what feels familiar. The same pattern shows up in groups. Social psychologist Irving Janis called it groupthink. When people gather, the desire for harmony often outweighs the desire for truth. Imagine sitting in a meeting at work. Everyone agrees on a plan that you know has flaws. You feel tension in your chest. You consider speaking, but the silence of the group presses on you. In the end, you keep quiet. Agreement feels safer than honesty. Belonging feels easier than standing alone. This reveals a deeper truth about fear. Many are less afraid of being wrong than of being excluded. To disagree is to risk being labeled difficult, strange, or disloyal. And that fear can silence the mind more powerfully than ignorance ever could. People trade truth for safety, clarity for comfort, freedom for approval. History is filled with examples of what happens when group pressure silences thought. Galileo was mocked for challenging the belief that the Earth was the center of the universe. Darwin was ridiculed for suggesting that life evolves. Martin Luther King was attacked for demanding justice. In their time, each of them faced the weight of collective resistance. Yet they thought anyway, they spoke anyway, and their courage reshaped the world. But the cost of thinking differently is real. To question the group is to risk misunderstanding, rejection, even hostility. That is why so many people prefer silence. Yet silence repeated becomes complicity, and complicity, over time, becomes the soil in which manipulation thrives. So what does this mean for us? It means that the decline of thought is not only caused by external systems, but by our own fear of being alone with the truth. It means that the danger is not stupidity, but surrender. Even intelligent people can be swept into collective blindness if they allow fear to govern their voice. And what now? Begin by noticing the moments when you stay silent against your own knowing. Ask yourself gently, am I quiet because I do not care, or because I am afraid? Practice speaking a small truth, even when it feels uncomfortable. Train yourself to tolerate the unease of disagreement. Because every act of honest questioning weakens the grip of collective stupidity. Every time you choose integrity over approval, you reclaim a piece of your freedom. And in a world that confuses loudness with wisdom, the quiet courage to think for yourself may be the most radical act of all. Beneath all the noise of society, there is a quieter loss that often goes unnoticed. It is the fading of inner dialogue. Once, people carried questions inside them like companions. They would walk with them, wrestle with them, let them unfold slowly over days and years. Now, The moment a question arises, it is handed to a search engine or drowned in distraction. The conversation with the self is cut short before it can even begin. You may have felt this in your own evenings. You lie down in bed, phone in hand, scrolling until your eyes burn. When you finally put it away, the room is silent. And in that silence, a restlessness rises. Instead of listening inward, you reach again for the glow of the screen. Not because you need more information, but because stillness feels unbearable. The habit of reflection has been replaced by the craving for noise. This loss matters because critical thought does not only come from books or debates, it grows in the hidden spaces where you sit alone with a question and allow your soul to respond. The philosopher Krishnamurti once said that to understand the immeasurable, the mind must be extraordinarily quiet. In that rare stillness, wisdom begins to take root. Without it, the mind becomes shallow, filled with answers but empty of depth. Think of the last time you spent a full hour with no distraction, no phone, no music, no screen. At first it may have felt peaceful, but soon thoughts emerged that were uncomfortable, memories you had avoided, doubts about choices you had made, fears about the future. Most people escape at that point. They call it boredom, but it is not boredom. It is the beginning of dialogue with the self, and it is in this dialogue that truth begins to appear. The emotional cost of losing this practice is heavy. Without inner dialogue, people feel restless and unmoored. They chase stimulation yet feel empty inside. They have access to endless information but no clarity. They are surrounded by voices but lack their own. This emptiness is not a lack of intelligence, but a lack of connection to one's inner voice. So what does this mean for us? It means that the decline of thought is not only about society's systems, but also about the silence we avoid within ourselves. It means that without cultivating inner dialogue, no amount of external knowledge can turn into wisdom. And what now? Begin to create moments of stillness in your day. Take 10 minutes to sit without distraction. Write down a single question and let your mind wander through it slowly. Keep a journal where you speak honestly with yourself without the pressure of being right. These are not grand actions, but they are seeds. Because every time you return to silence, you reclaim your capacity to think. Every time you dare to face what arises in the quiet, you strengthen your freedom. And in a world that pushes you to react and consume, the gentle practice of inner dialogue may be the most powerful path back to wisdom. At the beginning of this journey, I asked you to imagine waking up in a world where no one asks questions anymore. A world where noise replaces clarity, where people move fast but think shallow. That picture may have felt distant, almost exaggerated, but perhaps now you see how close it already is. Perhaps you see how easily distraction, conformity, and fear weave themselves into daily life. Yet there is another way to awaken. Imagine opening your eyes again in that same world of confusion. The screens still flash, the crowd still shouts, but this time you carry something with you that others do not. You carry the quiet flame of independent thought. You carry the courage to pause, to ask, to refuse the easy answer. And in that moment, the world no longer feels as heavy. The philosopher Carl Jung once wrote that people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls. He was not mocking us. He was naming the difficulty of looking inward, of questioning our deepest assumptions. To think critically is not only an intellectual act, it is a spiritual one. It is the choice to honor truth over comfort, growth over certainty, freedom over approval. But this path is not without its cost. To think clearly may sometimes leave you standing alone. You may feel misunderstood, even rejected. It may feel as if you are walking against the current of the group, yet with that solitude comes something precious. It is the quiet strength of knowing your thoughts are your own. It is the self-respect that cannot be taken away by popularity or praise. The first steps are small: reading slowly instead of skimming, pausing before you react, writing down your doubts instead of silencing them, creating moments of silence each day where your inner dialogue can return. These are simple choices, but they are seeds of wisdom. Over time, they grow into the kind of clarity that no system, no algorithm, no crowd can erase. Remember that thinking critically is not about knowing everything. It is about being willing to admit what you do not know. It is about asking honest questions, even when they unsettle your certainty. It is about staying curious in a world that tells you to be quick, loud, and sure. True wisdom is not loud. It grows in humility, in patience, in the willingness to look deeper than the surface. So what does this mean for you, here and now? It means that the responsibility for your mind cannot be handed to schools, or media, or platforms. No system will do this work for you. The task is yours, and when you rise to it, something extraordinary happens. You begin to see through manipulation. You begin to notice the difference between education and indoctrination, between information and propaganda, between connection and performance. And more importantly, you begin to lead. Not with noise, not with ego, but with depth. You become the calm voice in a storm of outrage. You become a light in a darkened room. And this is what the world needs now more than ever. Not sharper arguments, not louder slogans, but deeper minds willing to face the truth, even when it burns. So return with me to the picture we began with. You wake up in a society that no longer questions. But this time, you do not wake empty. You wake with the light of awareness in your hands. You see the same world others see, but you are no longer lost in it. And with every question you hold, with every pause you allow, with every act of reflection, that light grows stronger. If this message has touched something in you, I invite you to share your reflections. Write your doubts, your insights, your struggles in the comments. Because critical thinking does not grow in isolation. It grows in dialogue. It grows when people dare to speak honestly, even if their voices tremble. And if you feel the importance of this message, share it. Not because it is fashionable, but because it is necessary. Somewhere, someone you know is ready to hear that they are not alone, that they, too, can wake up. Stay curious, stay awake, and above all, keep thinking, because the most revolutionary act you can take in this moment is not to shout, not to conform, not to repeat. It is to think, and once you begin, you will never be the same.